Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Truth Transgression, or VeritaeCasus. Today we're going to be
According to the
reviewing a video, why Gen Z is so poor. So this is a subject that is very, very sensitive for Gen Z and of course millennials and so on, because just to preface things, the millennials came about in a time of tremendous economic hardship across the globe, really, with the Great Recession of 2008. So naturally to them, despite the fact that in an objective sense, the job market, even to right around the time when they were entering the economy and the job market in general, compensation relative to the value of the dollar was far greater, and things generally, just the overall index of goods and services as well as housing was in a far better situation than it is today. They still argue that this financial hardship at that time was far worse than anything that we're presently facing today. Now, I'm going to start the video with that whole preface there being stated and asserted. So let's see what this guy has to say.
The average 25-year-old Gen Z earns a household income exceeding $40,000, over 50% higher than baby boomers at the same age.
So this is one point. So, I hate how this poor resolution take is often presented, and I don't remember, I watched some of this video, not all of it. I don't remember if he even accounts for the inflation or the relative strength of the dollar as far as economic purchases or, strength is concerned. It's just blatantly just put out there like, oh, they earn 50% more than the fucking baby boomer. Yeah, do you know what 50% more is? That's like, so let's say the baby boomers were earning like around, not like, roughly like $28,000. Like, essentially like $24,000. Like, that's, yeah, that would be about right? Like 50% of that, 12,000. Yeah, it'd be about like 37. Yeah, about 27, 28. So you need to understand, like, that is not a huge difference from the time that they were in the job market, which was probably around like the early 70s, maybe late 60s, when they were entering the job market. So back then, many things, including housing, were a substantial fraction of the price that they are now. Like the average house was essentially less than a tenth of the price it is today. Like just like the starter homes and so on. Nowadays, you go out there and try to find a starter home. Ah, that's $400,000. Sorry, buddy. Tough luck. Or there's always this trades and skills deficit always cited with Gen Z, and that is mostly true. Or you'll have some skills, but they're not to the depth that's required to address a lot of these quote unquote starter homes that literally have just maladies afflicting them that would have the house suitable to be condemned, but for whatever reason they aren't. Like, horribly cracked foundations, just fundamental structural damage of the house that would basically have you essentially like excavating everything with heavy equipment and basically repouring the foundation with steel rebar and everything, getting everything inspected and up to code and that sort of thing. So the house is not actually condemned after, because the cities and counties in most places, especially if a lot of that work being done is reported to them, or somebody takes notice of it, somebody's going to look into it. And if they see that you don't have your permits or inspections done, excuse me, they're going to make sure that that shit gets shut down. So let's say hypothetically, even if you have all of the skills and plumbing, electrical, etc., to actually hook up your own house to the water and sewer of whatever city you're in, or let's say, you know, put in septic or a well yourself and all this other stuff, you could very well still get fucked out of it. It doesn't matter. But let's say if the house was was reconcilable, right? Like it's just drywall damage, like maybe a little mild mold, maybe the roof is rotting out, and you know you just need to replace a few wooden panels and get some like Tyvek or some whatever bullshit up there. Like that all is extremely expensive. So you're already purchasing this house for, and I've seen houses like this go for as much as $300,000 fucking dollars, and remote, like shithole locations where the average wage is like $15 an hour, like the average. That's the average. So, you know, it's not like the DC metropolitan area where the average wage is what, like 65 grand? No, if you were getting paid that much in that area, then yeah, it may be reasonable to suggest that you go about and do something like that to repair one of those homes. But you spend 300 grand on the house, and then you have to shell out more money for all of the tools, all of the materials, and not to mention all of your spare time to get that shit sorted out and put together. And the thing is that, like, let's say if you make a mistake somewhere, let's say, you know, I didn't seal up the roof properly, I didn't put on the God, what are they called? The shingles or what? No, not the shingles. God, I'm such a fucking idiot. But, you know, the little tiles on the roof. Let's say you didn't situate them in the proper order so that it's properly sealed so water doesn't get into the roof. And all of a sudden, it's been leaking and you had to give the project a break for a couple weeks, and now all the wood's rotted out. Because water got down to the wooden beams of the structure, and now there's severe structural damage. What do you do about that? Then you just got set back probably about 3 months worth of work. What are you supposed to do? And not to mention, leaving shit like that exposed to the elements for prolonged periods of time compromises the fundamental structure of that building. And we're talking about a building that might already be anywhere from 40 to 70 years old, maybe even older than that. So there may already be structural damage that hasn't been addressed, or everything may already be on the cusp of caving in on itself. But anyways, let's continue.
Yet 65% of Gen Z live paycheck to paycheck, with nearly half working 3 or more jobs just to survive. Raising the question, if Gen Z is doing so well on paper, why are they struggling to afford even the most basic necessities?
Nearly half having to work 3 fucking jobs to survive is ludicrous. Because if you go off the statistics, that means there's probably a few people. I mean, obviously these people are probably saddled with massive debts that they need to pay off. But there's probably a few people still living at home with their parents who are working 3 jobs, likely burning their candle at both ends, just to pay off their fucking debt, and maybe have a little bit of savings to start their future. That's crazy.
Necessities. While each generation has faced unique economic hardships, the underlying realities often point to deeper systemic changes, most notably reflected in younger generations' increasing inability to achieve home ownership, long regarded as a cornerstone of economic stability and national identity. Following World War II, the silent generation entered adulthood during an era of unprecedented economic growth and career opportunity, often referred to as the golden age of capitalism.
You know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in other videos, but one of the primary factors that's driving housing to being so to the point where it's an abject scarcity and the prices just skyrocket, is because of everyone. It is primarily because of the divorce rate, and a lot of the people who get divorced, especially women, they say, I do not want to settle for any less than I had before. So let's say in certain instances where they get divorced and the husband keeps the house. Let's say in most cases, yes, as far as marriage goes, women only marry people who earn more than them, who are more successful than them. So naturally, most of the assets are going to be owned by the man in those cases. Okay, so the man keeps the house, but she keeps like 50% of his retirement and all of the other stuff, and she gets like alimony on top of that. She's like, well, I don't want to settle for any less. So she goes out there into the housing market and buys herself a house of similar, if not equal, accommodations, or sometimes maybe even superior to the last set of accommodations. So now, instead of 2 or 3 people, or however many kids they have, living under one roof, you have those same people living under 2 roofs. So you essentially have hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of families, if not more, basically doubling the amount of housing that is required for the current existing population. Because people cannot settle their differences. Because women have no self-restraint. Because women have not been raised properly. Because men are not men, and they do not enforce the rules in their household, and we as a society, and the leaders of society, being mostly men, do not properly enforce the hegemony and the discipline required to instill stability and order in society. It's just how it is. It's very unfortunate. Let's continue.
Benefiting from FDR's New Deal policies and the GI Bill, the nation transitioned from a renting culture, where 60% of households rented their homes prior to the war, into one defined by home ownership. As demand for domestic manufacturing surged to meet consumer needs, American workers avoided competition from foreign labor, as much of the world was still recovering from the war's devastations. Pro-labor legislation like the Wagner Act of 1935 strengthened union power, with over 30% of the workforce unionized by the 1950s, directly contributing to their ability to purchase homes in an expanding post-war economy. Throughout the 1950s, a minimum wage worker could cover a month's rent with less than a week and a half of full-time work. And by 1956, the federal minimum wage...
You see, that part is crazy. Because if you were working at McDonald's or something like that, for example, you would not be able to cover living expenses in pretty much any state. I don't think there's a single state in this country where the minimal compensation, or the compensation that you would receive for doing these jobs, is nearly close to being enough to cover rent, transportation, and just your average living accommodations that are considered a necessity, like food, water, etc. I mean, of course, we're not even considering things that would be essential to maintain your sanity, like the ability to go out and spend money on recreation. That is by far off the table. Like, for example, where I live here in the northeastern United States, I believe I did the calculations for how much it would cost. Like, if we were just considering, like, the bare essentials, like food, gas, etc. If you were to get a job that would be able to sustain you as an independent individual, which is, largely going to be in, let's say, D.C., Northern Virginia, and some other areas in, like, I guess maybe New York and New Jersey and that sort of thing, then you would need a bare minimum of around $3,600. $3,600 to maybe in some instances like $4,100. And this was a calculation I did back in like 2021. So things have gotten worse. So I would be willing to lean more to like $4,100 just to survive every month and make sure that you can get to work. This basically leaves, like, let's say if you're making around $55,000 or $50,000, you can't sustain that state of living because you're only earning about $3,800 a month. So bare minimum, you would be needing to earn around like essentially like 60 grand a year annually to do that and have any level of savings. Like you have the bare minimum level of savings. You're basically saving maybe anywhere from $50 to $100 a month at the end of the month, which leaves you with anywhere from $600 to $1,200 at the end of the year in savings. Which, if you think about it, that's not even enough to cover major maintenance on a vehicle. Like, essentially what's going to happen is, it's like, let's say you're driving your vehicle, you drive, and of course, for a job that sustains this and living in housing that's relatively affordable by these metrics, you're probably living on average from anywhere from 30 to 50 miles away from your work. So you're driving close to 100 miles a day, and that's essentially what I was doing. I was driving 100 miles a day just to get to work and make a sustainable income. And and basically you're getting to a point where it only takes about 10 work days to accrue 1,000 miles in your vehicle, which means after 100 days you get 10,000. After 1,000 days, that's 100,000. So after a little over about a little under 3 years, you would have reached a point on your vehicle to where you would have at least one major maintenance malfunction on that vehicle, which by that metric you have a little over, probably you have around maybe $3,200, $3,000 to spend on that major maintenance. And accounting for inflation and increase in services, as well as the increase in value of parts, and also accounting for the fact that most employers do not give consistent raises for any jobs, or let's say they give none at all, then you're not going to be able to cover that expense. Because let's say this major expense in your vehicle ends up being, oh, you need new brakes, you need new brake pads and everything, on top of new rotors, and you need to maybe not drain the brake fluid, but you need to add a little extra brake fluid. Okay, so just for parts for that job alone, bare minimum, depending on your vehicle, it's probably going to cost you $600. Okay, that's like a quarter of your savings already gone, more than a quarter. Okay, so if you're going with the bare minimum housing, you're not going to have anywhere to perform that work on your own. And the tools to perform that job, albeit they're not complex, you can do it with basic hand tools, but you're probably going to hurt yourself in the process, and you're going to be sore for a couple of days afterwards. So let's say you get a ratchet set and everything, that's going to be like another $100 or so bucks, and you get a breaker bar, that sort of thing. Yeah, roughly like $100 to $150. Okay, so now you're already at $750, and that was a pretty lowball estimate on the brake parts, just by the way. So let's just round that up to about $800. I mean, in reality, it'd probably be closer to about $1,000 at this point. Okay, and this is just normal maintenance on a vehicle. Now, most cars, you have to replace the brakes every like 50 or so thousand miles, and with the metallurgy on most modern rotors, they have to be essentially replaced almost every 50 or 60,000 miles. Now, anybody who listens to this will probably go to the comments like, "Oh, that's not true. You know, he's blah 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 blah." Yeah, whatever, buddy. That's complete bullshit. You fucking know it. If you slam on your brakes at 50,000 miles, even driving the best you conceivably can, if you're doing a lot of highway driving where it's stop and go traffic and so on, those rotors are going to get warped. There are times where you got to slam on your brakes and so on, and if it's a very cold winter, yeah, I'm sorry, those rotors are getting warped there, buddy. It's just how it fucking works. That's just how it works. It's basic fucking physics. When you heat something up to a very high temperature, stopping a fucking 4,000-pound vehicle, and it's exposed to cold air like that, with no additional consistent heat or no temperance to basically slow down the rate of cooling, it's going to fucking warp. That thing just rapidly expanded and then rapidly cooled and rapidly retracted. Of course it's going to crumple. Of course it's going to become bumpy. You're a fucking idiot if you believe otherwise. But anyways, that is not exactly necessarily healthy for your calipers or your brake pads either. So you would have to essentially get that maintenance done every 50,000 miles. So based off that alone, like if you drove extremely conservatively, extremely light on your brakes, nothing but highway driving, no stopping ever, like you could theoretically pull this off once every 100,000 miles. So you know, we're getting to a point where you're spending $1,000 every 50,000 miles just for that alone. And this isn't even considering oil changes. Every 5,000 miles, you should be changing the oil in your vehicle. That means by 50,000, you need 10 oil changes, which an average oil change probably costs about, if you're performing it yourself, you know, replacing the filters and everything, that's about like maybe $700, $800 for 10 oil changes. So you've already gotten to the point where it's not sustainable. If you wanted to properly care for your vehicle to ensure it can carry you to your job every single fucking day without it breaking down, you've already gotten to a point with the very basic maintenance. This isn't even the complete maintenance for the vehicle, just by the way. We're not counting serpentine belts. We're not counting air filters. We're not counting. We're not even getting to spark plugs or you know, ignition coils. We're not even getting to that. Or you know, fuel injector, you know, cleaning bullshit additives to your fuel tank and stuff like that. We aren't even getting to that point yet. That's the crazy part. We aren't even getting to transmission fluid changes or flushes. We aren't even getting to transmission filters. We aren't even getting into that stuff. This is thousands of dollars. We're not even counting tires. Unless you're willing to drive on bald tires till they literally explode and cause you to spin out on the fucking highway. Shit. Anyways, let's continue. We only were talking about vehicle expenses there, just by the way. We're not even talking about life expenses, like having to go to the doctor, get medications, and that sort of thing. So we're thinking, like, if you're perfectly healthy, you have absolutely nothing wrong with you, nothing else goes wrong besides your vehicle. Your vehicle's your only expense. $65,000, $65,000 salary, all no expendable income at all. Let's continue.
Reached $8 per hour, equivalent to $11.77 today, enough to support a two-person household above the poverty line. And by 1960, the median home price was roughly $11,900, or approximately $128,000 today, while the median household income stood at $5,600, or around...
That is fucking crazy. The average house being $128,000. My fucking god. Like, even a median price, like, still, that's the median price. That means the absolute shitters we get today would only be worth a handful, like a couple $1,000s, which would make it, like, well worthwhile to get them, but instead you get them for 200 grand. Fucking insane.
60.
Damn it.
According to The Economist,
Lost my point in the video.
workers avoided competition. economy. Throughout the 19th while the median household income stood at $5,600, or around $60,000 today, it yielded a price-to-income ratio of just 2.1, allowing 60% of Americans to own homes by 1960.
You see, this is why I say the inflation metrics sometimes are bullshit, because those inflation metrics usually only account for your buying power relative to the average product on the market. Not things like vehicles, not things like houses, like things that are essential to life or producing a family or having any level of peace for yourself. Because who in the hell wants to live with their family for the rest of their life? Who in the hell wants to live with their parents? Who in the hell wants to live with anybody for that matter? Outside of whoever they choose as their companion. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you're not choosing to live with that person, it's going to be a very miserable experience.
Integrating blue and white-collar workers into suburban developments, where this unprecedented level of accessibility enabled the silent generation to accumulate the largest share of real estate wealth of any generation in U.S. history, creating a standard of economic stability that later generations would increasingly struggle to reach. And by the 1970s, the baby boomers entered adulthood during a period of...
Look how beautiful those women were in those videos. Like, I know the first one was unrealistic, but even the second one, like... most women now are like 2 or 3 times that size. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Growing economic instability, particularly in industrial jobs, where a 1970s Time magazine article described younger workers as feisty, ebullient, and unwilling to put up with things as they are, as many younger workers felt union leaders were out of touch with the realities of the changing workforce, and despite record wage increases, like the iron workers' 30% raise in 1973, money alone failed to address grievances over working conditions and job meaning. And as one union leader lamented,
Job meaning? Job meaning? You're a blue-collar fucking worker. The only thing that should matter is the fucking money. Hell, that's been the case for me in most of my jobs. I only give a shit about the money. If I'm not getting paid enough, then I can't mentally wrap my head around risking my life or doing half the shit that I was requested to do. Like, how fucking spoiled are they? They're such fucking bitches, it's unreal.
The younger generation is not satisfied. I don't understand what they really want, what it would take to satisfy them. And unlike how this union leader was actually able to articulate his concerns, today these actions would label Gen Z as both lazy and entitled. As unions weakened, corporations increasingly turned to outsourcing.
I'm Gen Z, and I believe that they're lazy and entitled. That's exactly what it sounds like. They're severely overpaid to do their fucking work. And in a time in America where everything was already fucking cheap. God, if they existed today, they would think this is hell by comparison.
Production to countries with cheaper labor and fewer regulations, accelerating the decline of the American industrial base and leaving workers with fewer stable, high-paying jobs. Economic pressures like the collapse of the Bretton Woods in 1971 and the oil crisis of the 1970s fueled stagflation, eroding purchasing power and deepening instability. And by 1980, the median home price rose to $47,200, or approximately $191,000 today.
Oh man. Wow, that's tragic. If housing prices were that low, like today, that would be that would still be crazy. That would still be crazy, guys. Only 200 grand? Whew. If the average house was that much, holy fuck. That would be crazy.
And with a median household income of $21,000, or roughly $85,000 today, it yielded a price-to-income ratio of around 2.25. However, mortgage rates also peaked at a historic 18.63% by 1981, pricing out many prospective buyers and setting the foundation for transforming houses from necessities into financial.
If housing prices were only twice as much of your income, and you were in your 20s, you could just live with your parents for like 2 or 3 years, and maybe 4 years, if you want to have like a little extra expendable income available. And you could buy the house, and you could own the house outright. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. And I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have been too adverse with that, because there's a time where you didn't necessarily leave your house until you were married, anyways. So shit. What happened, man?
Assets. And as a result, young boomers began to live at home longer while simultaneously leaving the labor force, mirroring many of the characteristics faced today, particularly as Gen Z has 86% less purchasing power than baby boomers had in their 20s. As the economic landscape continued to shift, Generation X entered adulthood during the tech boom, which created opportunities in software and e-commerce, but also widened economic inequality. NAFTA in 1993 accelerated offshoring, contributing to the loss of 6 million US jobs by 2010. Soaring tuition costs, which doubled between 1980 and 2000, forced many Gen Xers into student debt, where by 1995, graduates averaged $11,500 or $24,000 today in student loans, limiting career mobility for those outside high-paying tech roles. Rising housing costs added further pressure, with the median home price in 2000 reaching $119,000, or roughly $224,000 today.
That's
and a price-to-income ratio of 2.8.
That's crazy. So the housing prices really didn't start skyrocketing till like fucking recently, because for essentially, well, man, we already know this. What am I talking about?
5, resulting in lenders to aggressively market risky products like adjustable rate mortgages and interest-only loans, making homeownership appear attainable while masking significant risks, setting the stage for the 2008 global financial crisis, where Gen X homeowners lost 30% of home equity, erasing much of their wealth, while also leaving millennials to enter adulthood during a severe economic crisis. By 2008, millennials were the most educated generation in history, with 70% pursuing higher education by 25. Yet rising tuition costs saddled the average graduate with $40,000 in student debt, limiting financial flexibility and forcing many into jobs unrelated to their degrees, where unemployment peaked at 10% in 2009, delaying career starts and postponing milestones like home ownership and wealth accumulation, especially as the median home price climbed to $222,000 by 2010, or approximately $312,000 today, while the median household income stood at $50,000.
Even that I consider affordable. Like for me, if the average house was $310,000, I would actually be able to buy it.
Or around $73,000 today, yielding a price-to-income ratio of 4.44, where the housing shortage over the last decade has only worsened this issue, as new construction between 2010 and 2020 fell far below historical levels when adjusted for population growth. And during this period, only 6.8 million single-family homes and 3.1 million...
Yes, but one factor that's never being accounted for is the fact that the population hasn't really increased that much. It doesn't matter if the rate of housing has decreased, if the population has essentially stagnated. You know? Like, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like, shouldn't housing be going down if our population is in the decline? That only makes sense to me. That's why I say the whole thing about divorce as it becomes more common, because that's likely driving the increase in housing prices as it begins to fall out of favor to stay married.
Apartments were actually built, where Freddie Mac estimates a current shortfall of 1.5 million homes, where the National Low Income Housing Coalition reports a deficit of 7.3 million rental units for low-income households, where we can see that with each generation, systemic barriers of stagnant wages, rising education costs, and an inaccessible housing market has only grown larger. But unfortunately for Gen Z, these challenges were only expedited by the 2020 global crisis. Entering adulthood amid mass layoffs and inflation, Gen Z faces the compounded fallout of decades of economic instability. Between 1979 and 2024, wages have grown by just 29.4%, while productivity has surged by over 80%, leaving inflation-adjusted wages increasing by only 0.2% annually. Meanwhile,
Yep.
in-state tuition at public universities has soared from $394 in 1970 to $10,560 in 2020, burdening many Gen Z graduates with significant debt. But despite this, 39% of hiring managers report avoiding recent graduates, citing concerns over skills and preparedness, resulting in 35% of entry-level jobs to now require...
That's crazy, saying they lack technical skills. That's crazy. You're supposed to if you're hiring a graduate, then you should be training them to have the relevant skills to your field, because it isn't the duty of the professor or the duty of the institution in general to educate an individual in just general broad concepts of every field or industry. That's absurd. To do such a thing would take about 8 years of fucking schooling, if not more. It's insanity. It's completely ludicrous, these expectations.
Experience, causing a cycle of underemployment that leaves Gen Z
I need to add that it's your college experience is supposed to be baseline, fundamental knowledge that's supposed to be built on in whatever industry you go to, so you have fundamental understanding, the ability to wrap your mind around the abstract concepts relevant to that field. It's absurd.
to gain the necessary experience to advance, while debt further restricts their financial mobility, where housing just further compounds these challenges. By June 2023, nearly 1 in 10 U.S. homes were valued at $1 million or more.
That's
more
insane.
than double the share in 2019. With a median home price of $420,000 and a median household income of $80,000, the price-to-income ratio stands at 5.25. However, for Gen Z workers earning a median income of $40,000, this ratio increases to 10.5, leaving Gen Z with the option of living at home longer or going into an apartment, where the average monthly rent now exceeds $1,700 a month. And for the cherry on top, institutional investors projected to own 7.6 million homes, or over 40% of single-family rentals by 2030, just further leaves Gen Z to navigate in an economy where financial stability feels increasingly unattainable. Bringing me to my final point about perception. Why I believe it is so important when addressing a concern or a question like why is Gen Z so poor, when breaking down history or breaking down the different generational components, is that the answers lie in the history. The answers lie in the very same difficulties that each generation has faced. Why is Gen Z so poor? The answer isn't that they're experiencing something unique or their difficulties aren't unique compared to any other generation or to anyone else. I think you could argue, which I believe I did in this video, that the magnitude of their difficulties is unique. I think that you could say it is more challenging, it is more difficult. I believe the social safety net is completely gone.
Well, there's no easy solution. It's gotten out of control. So, essentially, this runaway inflation and devaluation of individual humanity has become such that, you know, in the desire for infinite profitability in industry, it's become such that, you know, it's no longer even tenable to remediate a lot of these issues. For a lot of these issues to be addressed, it required people to have a spine much earlier on than it is now. You know, the thing with the boomers is that back when they were demanding all those reforms, as far as like labor goes and everything, they were dealing with individuals who were much more reasonable than themselves. So, regardless, these problems were brought on by extremely spoiled individuals who never really underwent any level of profound hardship. Because the boomers were dealing with people who lived through the Great Depression, World War II, you know, a lot of times in American history where there was tremendous strife and actual suffering. I'm sorry, but the Vietnam War pales in comparison to the struggle, a lot of those conflicts actually implemented on society. A very small percentage of the population in comparison actually had to endure the consequences of the Vietnam War. It's unfortunate but true. And most of the people who underwent a lot of the turmoil in the Vietnam War tend to be more rational and sane individuals as well. So since it wasn't necessarily a pervasive conflict that everybody suffered from as a result, it never really endowed the realm of perspective required on the American populace to fully understand that their transgressions experienced by themselves are things not exclusive to their time period, not exclusive to their generation, but things that are passed on throughout history. And good-natured individuals who understand what suffering can do to an individual and wish for prosperity for their fellow man, especially in their countries, would never desire to implement policies that would inflict that suffering on them. It's just a relative mindset. Anyways, let's continue.
Now, but the reality is that the same difficulties, the same concerns are affordable housing, affordable education, that your dollar cannot buy anything, wage increases, some sort of national unity. These are the same things that we've been fighting for the last 100 years. So the question really is why is nothing ever changing? Now, of course, some things are changing, but in the reality, why are these few components not changing? One of the reasons why I believe, and the things that I...
Now the thing is, like, I say this thing about no one having a spine, but now with the advent of artificial intelligence and a lot of the advancements in technology nowadays, not having a spine is only going to basically further incentivize people who already earn a lot of money to basically be further incentivized to produce the technologies that will replace people who exist at the lower echelons who perform a lot of the jobs that will be replaced by artificial intelligence and automation. So people really need to understand. It's not that the capability doesn't exist to replace a lot of these jobs that are done now. It's that there's not enough investment and not enough labor backing it to do so in an efficient manner. There's not enough resources to be mobilized to actually orchestrate the processes required to carry it out. Yeah, that's essentially it. Let's continue.
I believe we could actually make a difference on is the perception of generations, the perception of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. When we look at history, it is so long, there's so many different components. When we look at American history, okay, well, it brings it down just a bit. But in our minds, the way we operate in society, we think American history as maybe World War I past, but really World War II and after. We think of World War II and after as American history. And the reality is that we're comparing what each generation has had as this sliding scale away from one of the biggest investments into America as what happened during the New Deal, what happened during World War II.
The reason why people view it that way is because that was the catalyst which drove American economic prosperity. A lot of the loans and that sort of thing given out during World War II, and all the weapons and all the support we offered Europe, of course, not for free. These things didn't come for free at Europe. There was no charity involved. A lot of this is what drove American industry and economic prosperity. Sure, there was momentum for it in the early 1900s, but it really wasn't properly fueled. The catalyst wasn't there yet to actually drive it into overdrive. And a lot of the talent that we received at the end of the war is what drove most of our innovation. It's just how it is. Anyways, let's continue.
What happened in this super unique time period, and we're not realizing that what is happening just isn't sustainable. What's going to happen is in 10 years from now, there will be a video, why is Generation Alpha, I think is what they are, why is Generation Alpha so poor? Because we're continuing to kick the can down the road, and we're not asking the right questions. We're not actually having discussions. We're not actually doing anything to fix the issue. One of the things that I get the most frustrated with is listening to older individuals.
Yes, but what's your remedy for these issues? A lot of people don't understand. Like, you can identify the problem, sure, but what are the resolutions to see these issues resolved? Now, obviously, it would be increasing demand for labor in a variety of areas, increasing it such that there is now incentive to actually train individuals to perform these jobs, and these jobs must be high-paying jobs, and they will be based off their demand to drive higher-skilled individuals into these positions. And in order to drive people into those positions who have those skills, there needs to be people who exist that have these skills, which requires more people to be trained in those areas. So this is something relatively genius the Trump administration is beginning to gear up to remedy now. The acquisition of areas like Greenland and even Canada, like let's say if Trump is at all serious about this, would give us access to natural resources where their extraction would require the acquisition of all new skill sets. Now, assuming we don't just import all these skill sets from across the globe, then we would create new jobs to produce value such that we could actually bring back a certain level of economic prosperity to the United States without automation. Now, this is not a guaranteed outcome, but this is one of the fundamental ways to increase prosperity, is to increase availability of resources and increase access to those resources. That's one of the fundamental ways. And to drive down all of the hindrances, like regulations and so on, that prevent access and utilization of any of those assets. Anyways, let's continue.
Baby boomers and millennials and Gen Z have this debate of who has it worse when in regards to housing.
Yeah, they're
high
just wasting
inflation, high
time.
interest rates.
It's the reason why the boomers want to do this is so that they can continue to stall and monopolize economic prosperity for themselves. That's essentially all it comes down to. Anyways, I need to take a break for a moment. I'll be back in a couple seconds. Forgive me once I find proper justification to actually properly invest in proper video editing acumen, I will completely remove those factors from the videos. Anyways, let's continue.
The total disaster that is our economy today. Because the reality is it's not, I'm saying this because I want to help, or I'm saying this because I want to inform. Largely, I'm saying this because I want the perception to be my life was harder. My life is harder. That I can justify my decisions. I can justify what my decisions were. That there wasn't maybe an alternative. Maybe there isn't an alternative, or there is one. The issue with...
I'm just saying, man, you look at the bags under this guy's his eyes. I don't think this man's been living an easy life. You know, because I've been there before. I've gotten the bags. I still have the bags. I don't work the same jobs that I used to. And they were hell, mind you. But, yeah, I'd say this man's had it rough. And he's saying he's trying to justify his choices, and I'd say the same. A lot of us try to justify our choices at the end of the day. We've all done things that we don't necessarily like. We've made choices to where, you know, we say, well, I can't have this, so I guess I'll settle for that for now. Especially in regards to relationships. And, you know, it's also a factor of the proper values being devoid of the average, you know, female counterpart in a relationship to actually maintain it. But it's not only that, but it's also the sustainability thereafter. You know, women, because of their hypergamous nature, look for a superior man. So if you can't provide superior accommodations to what they can for themselves, in their mindset at least, it doesn't necessarily matter how much you actually care for them, because they will stop caring for you. It's just how it is.
Perception, and I'm about to put myself at risk because I'm going to sound like a whining Gen Z. But I believe and I hope that I have built enough trust to be able to show the magnitude of what is happening. What happens being a generation dealing with perception, especially a young one, especially Gen Z. The reason that I made this video was I ran across a study that showed how much Gen Z believes they need to make a year to be financially well off. And I'm asking you that question. So, how much do you think Gen Z believes they need to make a year to be financially well off? $600,000 a year.
Aspect of the video I did want to talk about as well, albeit not to great length. I don't know many people who, who believe that to experience a certain level of economic prosperity, just to like basically attain that livelihood I spoke of before, to have a family and so on, where they believe they need to make 600 grand. That's absurd. That's completely ridiculous. I mean, maybe there's a lot of women who believe that, who haven't really entered the workforce, and of course, like I said, because of the nature of hypergamy, they believe X thing needs to be acquired to be satisfactory. Because they too are also experiencing the same level of hardships we are. And if they're making like 70, 80 grand a year in some of these areas of the country which I mentioned before, they're going to develop the conception in their head, if it is this hard right now, then for it to be easy, it needs to be many times more to have that cushion to where I can feel comfortable to sustain my current lifestyle, or to sustain a lifestyle that I desire. For most men out there, we realize that in order to have a lifestyle to be financially, you know, prosperous to a certain extent, we only need to make like maybe in those same areas around like maybe 120 to 130 grand a year to be able to drive the car that we want, to live in a place that we want, and to eat the foods that we want, and still have a decent, maybe a fair entertainment budget. Obviously, you know, I'd be even willing to say that it would be closer to 150, 160 grand to actually live a life that you would be happy and proud of. But that's not attainable. You can't attain that level of income. And, by all metrics, based off the financial data in the past that we see here, to experience that level of prosperity, if we were not just to ignore relative purchasing power of to not ignore it, just by the way, of housing and vehicles and major big ticket items in your life, and we were not just to go off of fundamental living expenses of fuel, furniture, etc., or any of that other stuff for food and so on, the average person would have to be making about they would be making around 120 to 150 grand a year, in contrast to their relative counterparts from the 1960s, from the 1970s, to have the same lifestyle that they did by comparison. It's just how it is, man. If the math were actually to be done, of course I'm providing rough estimates, but the estimates usually are only off by $5 grand. 120,000 is about right. 120, 140, 50,000. That's about right in comparison to what the average was making back then. If we were looking at housing prices and stuff now. Anyways, let's continue.
Just give me a moment. So just hold what it is that you're saying or what you're thinking inside. Being someone that has worked in the banking industry, having older parents, the majority of my friends are older, I instantly thought what they lack, what Gen Z lacks, what my generation lacks, is experience. They just don't know. I think, of course, there is some financial literacy in that.
To some extent, experience in terms of conceptualization of your present economic conditions. That's the experience lacking. But experience in many other ways as well. But I'm speaking in contrast to previous generations at this period in their lives. Of course, those people, when they were in their early 20s, did not fully understand what is required to be a senior software engineer or a senior mechanical engineer at any firm. They didn't possess those skills in their 20s. So what you're seeing now is not a skills deficit, but a training deficit. And it's not a willingness to do training, it's a willingness to provide it. It's just how it is.
I think Americans as a whole lack financial literacy. But I think, so then let's dive a little bit more into that. The perception of what happens with the lack of experience. So we don't have elders, we don't have wisdom being passed down, we don't have experience being passed down. But why 600,000? Why so dramatic? I think one of the answers is social media. The perception of what life is like on social media is so...
Well, yeah. This goes back to the hypergamy thing. Because, you guys know that a lot of these answers, if you're in the manosphere, or I shouldn't say that, maybe red pill. Use terminology like Nawaltz and MGTOW. That sort of thing. Watching a lot of these clips, the only people who respond with metrics like 500 grand, 600 grand, 1 million a year, and the fact that it said average, it's mostly women saying that. It's their hypergamous nature which drives that conception that they would require that much money. And of course, they're also one of the greatest consumers of social media. So of course they're going to be perceiving these lifestyles, and they'll say, "I want this lifestyle for myself," because they do not have a partner of relative financial status or class to them to to where they would be they could conceptualize the fact that these things are unattainable experiences for most people. They're things that most people only experience on vacation at one point in their life, maybe like once a year, at a relatively reasonable income. Like maybe back in the 1970s and 80s, back when it was at all attainable. It's not something that's a lifestyle suitable for everyone to attain. There's not enough real estate in this world, in the ocean or anywhere for that matter, for everybody to have a private jet, for everybody to have their own massive, well, maybe not massive yacht, but a modest yacht, okay, guys? Like $1.7 million, okay? Modest, alright? You know, there's not enough room in the world for everyone to own one of these things. And they can't seem to understand that, but they all want to have one single man who possesses this wealth and all these qualities. Well, you know, the 6 foot, 6-pack, you know, bigger than 6-inch, you know, what I'm saying. There's not enough men out there who possess all those qualities who can produce these things for them. And they can't understand that for some reason. A lot of them can't wrap their minds around that. Anyways, let's continue.
Not what real life is like. And I think that as a society, we say social media is at fault. I don't like to say what is at fault, but I actually think it is a small percentage in comparison to the important people in your life. Typically your parents, your siblings, those people that form a core component around you. In my experience, I've already shared the issues that I've had with people, you know, saying, how can you make these videos? You don't have a college degree. I run into that all of the time. But to dive a little bit deeper into it, it's almost been exactly a year since I had...
The reason why you can make these videos without having a college degree is because currently people who possess degrees in STEM fields, or any field for that matter, are not prospering at all when they enter the job market. They haven't been for some time now. Having a college degree hasn't been a guarantor of high income. That's just how it's been. It's only been a point to guarantee that maybe you'd be able to find a job somewhere. Because all of these relative economic boons and all of these industries that require STEM degrees, or require degrees in general, have fallen sharply. There's not nearly as much prosperity as there once was. This doesn't draw away from the viability or validity of his claims. This doesn't draw away from, you know, especially when citing previous statistics in the past. This man has put forth a great deal, a decent deal of effort and research into this video. There's a great deal of empirical data and evidence suggested, even from him, that actually validates what he's saying, and validates my points as well. It's just how it is. You don't even need the data to witness this sort of thing. You need only ask your parents to understand that economic prosperity has gone down in general for the average person, to understand that the average employer does not have nearly as much empathy or care for their employees, or they do not take care around their employees whenever they make a decision. They just, you know, they hearken only towards one end of things, and that is their own prosperity these days. And if allowed to do that, they would have always done that. Look no further than the Gilded Age. It's only in periods, as I said before, of immense suffering, like in the Great Depression and World War II, where people actually stopped to consider the prosperity of their counterparts. Anyways, let's continue.
10 blood clots in my lungs. Not the reason you're probably thinking. And I made a video about it, and I was explaining it. And I was sharing what I was thinking during this period. And one of the comments I received was, I bet what you were thinking was, you should have moved out of your mom's basement. So, what a nasty comment, right? And so I start to think, Why wouldn't they just ask? I mean, I've been living on my own, completely self-sufficient, paying my own rent here in Austin for 2 years. But then I hear someone actually in my life. I just heard it, and this kind of also fuels this video. Is
It's sad, man.
that I'm living in a shack because my apartment is 600 square feet, 300 square feet, small.
You know, it's funny that so many people talk shit when they own living accommodations. It's like, ha! My apartment is 10% additional square feet more than yours. Ha! Like that sort of thing, you know? Like just some absolutely stupid bullshit. And they just take jabs at this guy who like has actual problems. Like they think it's like, oh man, I got one over on somebody. Oh, I feel great today. You know, maybe this guy really is better off than he is. But he got his job through fucking nepotistic connection. And now he's like stroking his own ego, like, oh, I'm so fucking great because I knew somebody in the industry. Oh, just how it is, man.
Smaller than the average home in 1940. This is someone that is close in my life, right? So I hear that, coupled with
that explains the bougie fucking backdrop. Just trying to give a false pretext of, you know, status to those individuals who only glean things at a superficial level from a 5-second take to reduce his credibility. Explains his choice in doing up his hair and also having the crude button up, right? Because there are some presumptuous individuals who will not hear you out just purely from an aesthetic analysis of your disposition. It's ridiculous.
Why can't he quit when will he quit YouTube and get a real job? But what gets better is that then I just interviewed someone that you could say is famous in the Austin area. I interviewed him, and now I am able to be talked about. We're now talking about my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel made it to the Christmas card. But nothing was ever said before. Not a word. Not a word.
Well, obviously, you only have credibility once you've associated with someone who has status. You never once had credibility. You never once made a valid claim before then. That's how it is in this day and age. Absolutely fucking stupid. And you know what I say? Who gives a fuck about those people? Those people are just as worthless as the platitudes they espouse.
Perception. And so I think to myself, the 600,000, that extreme margin.
This man puts too much emphasis on other people's opinions. Who gives a fuck about them?
Is get away from me. I don't have a social safety net. I don't have elders speaking to me. Social media wants me to be this. My parents want me to be this. These people want me to be this. These people want me to be this. If I made such an exorbitant amount of money, I could push it all away and maybe I could figure out who I am. And maybe I am so off on this, but part of me believes that whenever I'm really struggling in my life, I think about the furthest thing. If I just had this, this could fix this. If I just had $600,000, maybe I could afford a home, maybe I could afford health care, maybe my parents would be proud of me, maybe this, and this. Why I want to
no shit. Everybody wants to suck the dick of the guy who's got $600,000 a year job. Nobody wants to suck the dick of the guy who makes 70, 80, you know, just barely scraping by, living on his own. Which is funny that, you know, if this guy is able to live on his own in Austin, that means he's probably about, like, roughly top 40, 30% of earners in the country. So he's already doing better than most people, and people are still taking shots at him, which is fucking crazy. That's absolutely ludicrous, if you think about it. It's absolutely fucking insane.
share some of these perspectives is that at the same time I get, why are you wasting money on rent when you should buy a home? It's never enough. It is never enough for anybody. And
yeah, because everybody's looking for that BBD, baby. They're looking for that bigger, better deal. They want to see a guy who's got resources that they can leech off of and steal from. You know, that's the thing. Like, this guy's got the wrong mindset. He's trying to impress all these people. You just need to realize you don't need it. You just need to not give a fuck. Fuck all these people. They're just leeches, bro. They just want to fucking steal from you. That's all it comes down to. That's every man, for that matter. People don't talk to you unless they want something from you. It's just how it is. Even your friends, that's often the case. I mean, albeit that relationship's transaction might be much cheaper, but people are getting something out of anything, man. That's just how it is. That's basic human psychology. You're never going to escape it. It's just how life is. I mean, albeit I'm 2 years younger than this guy, but I already know this shit. If you've been working in any industry, you know everybody's only trying to juice a fucking nut. That's all it comes down to. Nobody gives a fuck about anybody but themselves. And that's the thing. If they're in a position where they can milk their status, their relative status, they'll continue to do so for the longest possible time. It's just how it is. Whatever makes themselves feel important. Anyways, let's continue listening to this man's problems.
Reality is that each generation is getting divided further from the previous one. And that's when I need to hear, or Gen Z needs to hear, what you're doing is enough. You're doing great.
Dude. Like, anyone who's not in information technology probably doesn't understand how fucked we are right now. Like, they don't understand, man. Like, they don't understand. There's so many jobs already in the process of being replaced, if not having already been replaced, by artificial intelligence. That even being able to provide for yourself right now, especially in these economic conditions, is a feat greater than basically scaling the side of Mount Everest. Basically scaling a sheer fucking cliff with little to no experience. I hate to say it, but many people can't make it right now. It's just how it is. Come on, you literally got most of these bitches out here making their living off selling their fucking vagina on the internet. Like, that's crazy, man. It's fucking ludicrous. Our values are completely gone. Nobody values the edifice of family, or the fundamental pillar of the household, the apex, the keystone, which it is all built around, the man of the family. Nobody gives a shit about that anymore. Society doesn't value family even in the slightest. Even our elder generations are becoming largely apathetic towards it. They just take it as a given that this is something that's more important, that we should just inherently recognize it from birth, despite the fact that they're the ones who encouraged its destruction. They incentivized its destruction. It's ludicrous, man. These people are the pinnacle, the apex of stupidity.
Maybe you should try it this way. Oh, I did
and this man's
and
just
that
trying
was
to
a
find his
mistake.
way.
This happened, this happened. Showing what happened. That's what you can learn from history. The amount of clips that I watch throughout history to make these videos, unbelievable. An unbelievable amount. And what I see is we are repeating over and over and over and over again. But the lessons, the knowledge, the wisdom I am pulling from that to then pursue my life in a different trajectory is fundamentally changing my life. This past year has changed my life because of how much I have learned and how much I've realized a lot of the difficulties in my life actually don't really have to do with me. Now I get the opportunity to decide.
I can't believe it takes having to dig and do that much research for somebody to fully understand that. Now, obviously, like, this guy seems like an earnest guy. I mean, you can tell from the bags under his eyes that he probably works hard. I mean, he's a very articulate individual. There's not too many people out there capable of conducting themselves in such a way, or even putting forth information in a compendium that's presentable and digestible to the average person. So, you need to understand, most people are inherently incapable. And I've met plenty of people in Gen Z who are incapable, but it's only because of their own perceived self-efficacy. They've never been told in their lives that they would ever amount to anything or have any level of success or hope. They only see the contrast of their relative efforts and where it's leading them into the future. They see the relative value of something, and they make the assumption that there's something wrong with them, because they assume that the rules of the game were designed by somebody infinitely superior in intelligence and capability to themselves. That the game was made to be played fair. That the game was made for you to be successful, because you observed those qualities in your parents who come 2 generations prior. But that is not the case. They need to realize that the systems that we currently reside in are created by people just as fallible as you are, and that no one is, how do I say, like, just, no one is like an impregnable, absolute pillar of constant truth and virtue, of constant success. No one is impertinent to failure. They do not exceed failure. They're not beyond reproach. You get what I'm saying? I mean, I'm throwing a whole bunch of words out there, but no one is perfect, is essentially what I'm saying. It's common, cliche expression, but there's not a single person in this world who never makes a mistake. There may be some people who come pretty close to it, but even Elon Musk, who's hailed as being one of the most intelligent, capable individuals in the country, makes many mistakes, and incredible ones. Incredible mistakes. It's because he lacks experience in those areas. Even the most intelligent, capable person cannot succeed in areas where they lack experience or understanding. If you do not at the very least have understanding, you cannot expect to have success. And there are many people who rank amongst our leaders, our most successful in the intelligentsia, the ruling class, that essentially lack understanding of how our system even functions, or how economics even work, or the fundamental principles of economics for that matter. Anyways, let's continue hearing this guy out.
How am I going to navigate these difficulties? And yes, I understand we're getting away from why is Gen Z so poor, but I believe all of this. 1, this is the answer for all of our concerns, and 2, this is something that needs to be discussed. This is really why Gen Z is so poor. They are not only poor financially, they are poor in guidance, they are poor in support, they are poor in anyone to actually listen to what it is that...
Well, yeah, exactly. Because people who are raised of a certain mindset, especially spoiled individuals like we previously cited with the boomers, who are enumerated a variety of different advantages just by virtue of their existence, by people more benevolent or empathetic than they are. These people, again, it comes down to the hardship. They never develop the empathy required to actually foment the same level of growth in any of their, subordinates in the future. Anyone subordinate to them is going to be inherently inferior to them because they can't conceptualize a world where these things weren't already provided to them. This goes back to what I was saying before, where basically all these kids they believe there's a systematized hierarchy that's been created to basically curate the rules of the game, to basically act as a ref, as a medium, to mediate the transition of society into the future. That they believe that these things, there's always a place for them in society. It's been chiseled out for them in advance, that they have a place for them to sit at the table. That is not the case. Whenever you as a person occupy something, it deprives another of that opportunity. And I say this because this is a crucial point that a lot of the boomers don't understand. A lot of them have accrued vast degrees of wealth to where they would be more than sated well past their retirement. In fact, some of them have even accrued generational wealth. But yet they still continue to work. They still continue to occupy their positions. And they still deprive the workforce of those positions so that other people will have an opportunity to earn that same amount or make decisions or be a leader in the business culture. They never step aside. This is a recent development. Before, people aspired to retirement. They aspired to enjoy their lives. They aspired to enjoy their families. They aspired to build their families. That is no longer the case. Let's continue.
They're saying, I personally have already said, I don't believe Gen Z is that great at communicating. I think largely that has to do with what happened in 2020. But if you listen to what they're actually trying to say, it's someone that needs help. Gen Z as a generation largely needs some guidance. We have to get out of here. What's so frustrating is to listen to someone that is older or whatever complain about how much groceries are or things.
Well, you guys need to understand that this guidance is never going to come. Like, people are waiting for this assistance, this ephemeral assistance from humanity. People just as prone to error as you are, just as prone to misinformation. Wisdom will not be handed down because it is assumed that wisdom already presides within you. That's just how it is. They believe that stuff is just naturally imparted from generation to generation. And that wisdom that you seek may not actually exist in the source that you desire it from, to begin with. As in, they do not possess that wisdom. That wisdom needs to be sought out and dug up throughout from the tides of history. As in, you need to find the answers for yourself. That is what wisdom is. Wisdom is something that is not imparted upon you by someone else. Wisdom is something that's experienced.
What do you think a Gen Z is feeling like? And take Gen Z out of it. What do you think a young person is feeling like? What do you think a young person trying to raise a family is feeling like?
They're not empathetic and they can't conceptualize it.
We don't need to have it get escalated with unproductive conversations. And as soon as we can break free from that, we can begin to focus as a nation on the reasons why these difficulties keep happening over and over and over and over again.
Nah, the finance bros are just gonna come. Nah, bro, we need to maximize profit, dude. We need to fucking increase those margins, bro. Like, we can't be having all these workers taking up all this money and shit, bro. We can't be having a civilization and people consuming stuff and buying goods. Driving the economy that keeps the stock market afloat. We gotta replace all of them, bro. That way people can consume without earning money. Yeah, that's gonna work out. That's fucking genius, Wall Street fucking stockbroker bros. Oh man, you guys sure spent a long time getting all those fucking MBAs to realize that you can fucking destroy all of civilization with one single investment. Incredible. And make yourselves obsolete. By the same token, you're making everybody else obsolete. Oh, genius. Fucking dumbass MBAs. Fucking retards. Jesus Christ.
So, anyway, I felt like I was complaining there, and I don't like that. I don't like giving other people attention to anyway. But I think it needs to be said. So, thank you all so much. As always, this video marks 100 videos and my 2-year anniversary for my first video on the same day. Very special moment. This will also come out when I will be in New York. So I actually might end up pulling. I had that big health scare. So it feels so unique. It feels like we really are doing something. And
no, this guy does make good videos. Damon Cassidy. Very good, informative videos. A great deal of the time. I suggest you guys go check him out, but if anybody's watching this who hasn't watched this shit, I find it extremely unlikely. Shoot, the guy only has 60k subs. I've got basically none, so It doesn't really make much of an impact, but I know I have a few friends who do watch these videos, so, they're mildly informative sometimes. I like to give additional philosophical perspective where it seems that some areas are void of it. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Truth Transgression, or VeritaeCasus. It's an unfortunate world we live in, but we're forced to endure it, and each day you make it is a blessing upon the earth, I suppose. Y'all have a good one.